everyone, welcome. So if you're just getting in, feel free to grab something to drink, something to eat, and then get your seats, and we'll get started in just about a minute. Thank you. All right, folks, come grab your seats. Awesome, welcome. If we haven't met yet, my name is Kat Kelly. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship Programming here at Yukon. And I'm so grateful to be able to do the work that I do today and to be having the conversation that we're about to have. Just so honored. Starting today, I want to acknowledge the land that we're on, the land of the Kluane First Nation and the Tonquachin Council. But more so than that, because today's topic is perspective, people, place, and transformational change, I thought so hard about what I wanted to say. And when I started working about a year and a half ago, I remember rehearsing the land acknowledgement over and over again. I was new to the territory and the names were unfamiliar to me. And so I rehearsed them. And through the work and the opportunities to learn that I got through Yukon's First program, thank you Kelly Proudfoot and Kelly Milner and the entire group, to do more than just say the names and to acknowledge the land, but to understand the histories of the people who have lived here for time immemorial, and to acknowledge the impacts that we have as folks that live and to visit here. And so more than acknowledge the land, my personal commitment to reconciliation has been for any tourist that come visit me in the Yukon, to ensure that they leave not only knowing the names, but also understanding the history, and doing that through engaging Indigenous tour guides, events, workshops, thank you. So that they know when they leave here the names and the histories of the people here. And it's in that spirit that I want to start today and invite Kaylee Steele, who is going to talk to us today about Yukon First Nation Cultures Tourism work for the Respectful Travel Guides. And then following that, Mary Jane Johnson, who's going to talk to us about being involved in that work. And then we'll get started. All right, thank you, folks.
Okay, is my mic on? Test. I can't tell if it's on, but I'm just going to trust that you can hear me. Good afternoon. My name is Kaylee Steele, and I would also like to acknowledge with gratitude and respect that I'm speaking today from the traditional territory of the Kluane and the Tonquachin Council. I feel very privileged to be able to work for the Yukon First Nations Culture and Tourism Association. my colleague Katie, my friend and colleague Mary Jane, and I am excited to be here today to talk about this project. Public speaking is, I always feel a little nervous before, but once I'm in it, it's all good. So I wanted to just provide a little bit of context about the Respectful Travel Guidelines, and then, like Kat said, Mary Jane's going to speak a little bit more about the project and the intentions from her perspective. So the Respectful Travel Guidelines is an initiative that YFNCT started working on in early 2021. And it really came about after just hearing a lot of anecdotes and stories of instances where respect maybe wasn't at the forefront of people's minds. And really the intention of the initiative was to develop a set of guidelines and of teachings that were common to all Yukon First Nations that could help educate and build awareness of what it means to travel respectfully and to engage respectfully with land, with culture, and with community. And to do that from a Yukon First Nations perspective. You know, I believe that when you know better, you do better, and so building awareness is the first step in doing that. So our process was to bring together First Nations elders and knowledge keepers from all 14 Yukon First Nations communities, and we also had a member from Taku River Tlingit First Nation to come together for 3 days of conversation and gathering to talk about traditional teachings and values of share, care, respect, and relationship building, and how that would relate to travel on the land, travel in communities, engagement with culture. And from that, we developed a What We Heard document and 10 guidelines that are the foundation for this work, and that will be used to build that awareness, not only with visitors, but something that I heard the elders talk a lot about is how really these guidelines are for everyone. And they're not just, they're being shared initially through a tourism lens, but really they're applicable across sectors, and they're important across sectors. And another point that is important too is that the guidelines that we have today and that we're getting closer to sharing with a wider audience are not going to be, they're not set in stone, they're not final, and they will evolve and change as the tourism industry changes, as the climate changes, and that was an important point, that we wanted this to be a living document, and we wanted there to be opportunity for review and change as time goes by. I think I'm going to leave it at that for now and let Mary Jane share her piece, but I'll be happy to share more when Kat asks questions.
Mary Jane Johnson. Aswa show ina, aswa kajat, ajina, chuan man, inje, chuan man, san ije, burwash, nije. I wanted to share that because in our way, when I let you know where I'm from, how I my family, then you know that I have the right to speak as a Danajal, as a people, a woman of the people, and our way, Dan is people. And in the linguist way, they've given us the title Salam Tushoni. This is not ours name, but it's given me that right. And then when I speak, you know where I come from. I'm sharing that with you. I explained that to you a little bit. Shoni then for offering this space to share our thoughts and words with each other on effecting positive change in the North. We say North for people that are from the South. And how we together, working together, can shift perspectives by bringing a different story to the story that has been in place. I'm honored to be here and to open with words that honor my ancestry, my grandmothers and grandfathers, and to bring honor to the name that I have been blessed with during my lifetime, Gutia. So Gutia, it's not hard to say, Gutia. That's the name I grew up with. But when I went to the convent and residential school, I became Mary Jane. And that's how it's easy for people to remember that because it's English. But in our way, I am Gutia. I told you my Hashapun to let you know where I come from and that I have a right to speak as a Danajal, a Southern Shoshone woman, and my connection to Kluane, Haiti, Kluane Lake country, all of the lands and waters in that area. The kind of work that we have been working on with words for visitors is a story of hope. It's a story of hope for land and for waters. And those kind of actions and those words and that thinking you will always care for people. And when you care for each other, you care for all of our relations. That little chipmunk, that little bumblebee, that tree over there, you care for them. As soon as Sophie walked, my great-grandmother on my mom's side, my mom's great-aunt, so my great-great-aunt in English way, but then Kay, we say Asuasho, our big grandma. She told us stories about how the community prepared to make a nakwa'a. So that house up there is Nakwarakun, up there in Kwanlundan. They call it a potlatch house. When we say a potlatch, a gathering, we say nakwa'a, a potlatch. She told us how people came to a nakwa'a before the Namba'a, the army of gold seekers came here. Namba'a is a warrior or army kind of person. Before they came, the gold seekers into this Yukon, and how people came from all over and prepared to make a from the youngest to the oldest. Everyone had a place in a kwayajal. A kwayajal is a welcoming. You're preparing, you're anticipating, you're exciting. You have that excitement in the community, in your actions, and preparations, because visitors are coming. You're going to give them the best that you have. And then this is how our great-grandma, Asusho, told us to welcome visitors. When visitors come, give them your seat. Move over to sit on the bed if you have to. Give them your tea. If it's your last sugar, give it to them. Share the best that you got with your visitors. Then the highway came, and there was another kind of nakwa'a, the U.S. Army. These visitors left a trail, and this trail changed how the land and waters were cared for. During the late 1960s and 70s and into the 80s, the First Nations elders came together and spoke about how important it was to look after the lands and waters. And together, today for our children, tomorrow, became how this land was envisioned to be looked after. I laid out a bit of that kind of chronology of how visitors came and how the elders still today, and I find myself an elder now, And how the Yukon First Nation tourism and culture are trying to look at that kind of teachings of caring for land and waters. I wanted to share just a couple of words from some of the elders that were present at some of the discussions. One of them, one of the elders was Lizzie Hall. Lizzie spoke about respecting not only this self, but respecting each other. Respecting each other. When you're going to have that kind of respect for self, you become self-governing. And if you have that respect for each other, you as a group become self-governing, or as a nation become self-governing. And when you have Netzitra, you hold each other up in respect. Some of these ladies and some of you just want to listen, and I just find like I'm just 16, 17 years old listening. And I want to honor an elder that has passed from Ta'an. I don't want to say her name, it's not my right, but I would like to share her words that she spoke about. She talked about soap berries, she talked about moose sausage, she talked about salmon. How important it was to look at all of these kinds of bounties and gifts from the land, and how it is shared with all other animals, and we being an animal as well. That we need to think that when we get a salmon, we don't just take the eggs, the roe of the salmon, we use the head right down to the last rib on that salmon, making use of all of that salmon. And you give thanks for that salmon, for its life and its sharing that life with you, their life with you. She talked about the spruce tree. She said that the price of wood going up more and more, and people, that's all they're worried about, is just that how much that tree is important for them to help to cut down their fuel costs in their home. But they forget how important that tree is because of the sap, that spruce sap, and how good that medicine is, how good that inside bark of that spruce tree is, how important that needles are to help you when you got pneumonia and you need that spruce tips and that to help you when you have that kind of cold, and how important the roots are in that spruce tree. You're pulling the roots like this underneath, and pull up the roots and roll it up, and then when it's time to use it, you unroll it, soak it, unroll it, split it all the way down, dig out your birch bark, and start sewing your birch bark together with the roots. Learn to look at all of the value of that tree. Learn to look at all of the value of the salmon and the soap berries, not just to cut down your cost of what it costs you to heat at home. Shoni then to that elder that has passed, but her words are part of us. I wanted to share another word here from Jimmy Johnny. Jimmy is from the Nachonoyak, and they have been doing incredible work. Kaylee, you were up there in sharing some of that. They have a program in their high school a tourism program in their high school. Every school should have it. Jimmy has he was a big game guy. He was a fisher, he's a dancer, he's a storyteller, and when you look at him, you think that he's like only 70 years old. Don't let him go back. He's way older. But he shared stories about how you're not going to put things, once you take that action, that step forward, that inspired innovation, that lady that we were talking to earlier here, once you start to take that kind of steps, he said that you're not going to get your pot and everything all ready and then put your pot on the back burner and forget about it and look at everything that you've laid out and prepared for. You want to have that, what you're working on, working on it, keeping it alive. And to do keeping it alive is that you have to make that trail. You have to make that path forward. By making that path forward, we have to have responsibility for each other, for our governments, to make that path to move forward. I could just keep on going. I got pages and notes. And the other thing that I wanted to share here was that all of the elders that participated, Julie, myself, I shouldn't say names like that, myself, and then there was about 4 other people that went to residential school. And when we say that we survived the residential school, you got to give us a pat on the back. We survived. And the other elders that were there and participated, they didn't go to residential school. So those ways of thinking and living is really important. And they were raised up, and my mom was raised up. My mom's still here with us today. And she's got still a good sense of humor. It's Katie's auntie. In 1976, they were going to put a pipeline down from Alaska, right across the highway from where we live at in Burwash Landing, across the highway, like maybe just same far as that river. And they had an inquiry going on along this highway called the Illicit Inquiry. There was Ken Lissick, Edie Bomer, and Willard Phelps came to the community. And we were, each of the elders were presenting, and it came my mother's turn to speak. Tooth Sen is her name. And Tooth Sen she's of a strong mind. She explained to them, thank you for coming here to our community to hear us. When you look at this land, you look at this land, you see it from that kind of paper. You look at this land from that kind of a paper. When I look at this land, I look at it like my hand. I know which way that salmon comes. I know which way that grayling comes in the springtime. I know where to go and get that berries at different times of the year. I know where there's good spring water. I know this land as far as you could see around you. I know this land. I don't know it from that paper. And that's how many people they know it from that paper. It's up to people to take that kind of tours and visitors and the guidelines that have been laid down to walk and talk and live respectfully on the land and the waters in this place here that has been identified as the Yukon. But in our way, this was Kluane. In our way, a respected elder, Annette, told us in 1976, she said, gee, Kluane used to be just a fish camp. Look at it now. Remembering that visitors have only come into this land, but when they came into this land, because this was part of Canada, that's not the United States, I shouldn't say things like that, I guess. this area around on this land here, this was a trading area, and the Tlingit people wouldn't let nobody come in this area. They protected this area because we provided them with the furs that they needed, the gopher robes, gopher skin robes, the marten and the ermine that they traded with the Russians. They didn't want anybody in, and they protected it. Without realizing all of this, during the time that my great-grandfather, Grandpa Jimmy Johnson, was selling furs to the Tlingit people, and Grandma Sophie Watt, a Sioux Show, her family trading with the Tlingit people. We made one of the last places at Yukon, this part of the world, I guess, in North America, one of the last places to be contacted by non-native people in North America. We can go back, and a Sioux Show can tell when she was here with us, and my mother recorded her in 1977. She said, "Gee, did you want me to talk for it?" Mom said, "For the next generation." So now people could hear her voice still yet today because my mom recorded her. She said that, I remember that first time we went down there, they had a trading post at Coffee Creek on the Yukon River. Those guys are looking for that yellow rock. And we went down there, and we were packing all of the stuff they traded. She said, "They're possibly food. I don't know what kind of food. Heavy though." And they got dogs and kids and all of the women packing. And she said that her grandma, halfway, they sat them underneath a tree. "What's that husband of mine put on our back anyway?" They open up everything, possibly food. They taste it. First one they taste, salt. Tastes very good. Don't pack that one. Yes. Next one, they taste it, they open it up. Kakana sugar. Oh, keep this one. Next one they taste, they open it up, and then everybody tastes. How come they make us pack dirt? Flour. So in our lifetime, we had stories. We were raised up on stories like this of elders from when they first tasted sugar, salt, flour, when they first saw a African American, when they first saw somebody with red hair. My great grandma's dad, she got 10 down there in Fort Selkirk. They didn't know, they thought he was Quechua, they thought he was Bushman. And they had red hair and red all over his body, red hair. I must have maybe a lost Russian, I guess. But they didn't know what it was. They tried to talk to him for 1 week. They said, 7 days going by, they go by, they talk, everybody tried to talk to him. No, they didn't know what he was. They thought for sure a Quechua will come alive. They made a big crier, and they put him on there, and they burned him. No, don't get surprised. If you've never seen somebody like that in your life, what are you going to think? You're raised up with Quechua. Quechua will come to us. We got to do something. Take it away, bring it away. So in our lifetime, we all have that kind of stories. All of the elders that participated in these guidelines are coming from that kind of knowledge and care from this land. We're all raised up with creation stories from as far as we can remember, and try to pass it on to our grandkids. You pass that kind of stories, that creation stories on, and you carry on with it, you carry on that ancestral knowledge. So we're trying to use that kind of and bring it to English words, into English policies, into English ways of doing and approaching land and water. I'm going to finish off here with Johnny saying that chew for us is water. You could say chew. Chew. Yeah, chew. It's water. And he said that people have to be so careful and look after that chew, because that chew is life. It's our life. We will not be alive. We will not be here on this planet if it was not for chew. We wouldn't communicate, and neither would all of the other birds, neither would any other living things without chew. So we give thanks for that, and we give thanks for the words of the elders that guided how the guidelines for visitors came about with the tourism, Yukon First Nation tourism and culture. I'm just going to close here because once I can, sometimes I can go off on tangents and forget what I'm talking about. I just wanted to say that Quander is your stories. You, Natsatsi, is you are making the story. You're making the story. So when we're thinking of how we are looking at land and water and how we are welcoming visitors into that land and water, that we are caretakers or guardians of, then we know that once we take that into our heart, then we are also making new stories. And new stories can only happen in a good way when we open ourselves up for new thinking, new beliefs, new practices, and that it doesn't just happen. We have to make it work to happen. And let's show them. Oh, finish and thank you.
That was great.
Wow. What a way to start this conversation. We jumped right into it, and the whole room, the energy's changed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We didn't get a chance to introduce the entire panel.
Yeah.
So if we can get a chance, if you can introduce yourself, the work that you're currently doing, and let's start there. Morgan.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I know many of you already. It's very nice to see you. My name is Morgan Wienberg, and I'm co-founder and executive director of a child protection organization called Little Footprints, Big Steps that is in Haiti. But I grew up here in Yukon and have been living in Haiti since 2011. The work that our organization does is primarily family reunification, working with children who've been separated from their families to reconnect them with their parents and then build the self-sufficiency of their families, and trying to work really closely with the Haitian authorities in doing so that we're kind of reinforcing the local child welfare system while we're doing that. And all of this kind of came about to really play into our conversation today, because my perspective and my understanding about orphanages, child protection, international development, aid, Haiti, when I first went to Haiti as a volunteer in 2010 compared to now, is so different. And the lessons that I've learned from living there and understanding better how to try and actually have a positive impact, we're talking about positive change, is something that I'm really passionate about sharing. And it's just helped me grow so much as a person and see really the world differently. To start out, I was a volunteer, 19 years old, went to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, and volunteered in an orphanage because I wanted to, help vulnerable children, and quickly learned that the children were actually being exploited in the orphanage and had families. And now I collaborate with the local authorities to actually close down those orphanages and reconnect the kids with their families. But there are some things that, so many parallels to what were mentioned here. And I think about, just to get straight into it, it's so important when we have the self-awareness to recognize that everyone has a different worldview. We all have these different perspectives on life based on where we were raised, the culture and environment we were raised in, our experiences. And so every situation that we experience, each of us might experience it differently. What I consider respect, for example, might be different than another person's. And it might even be different than what it was for me 10 years ago. So I also really loved what Kaylee said about things like the respectful tourist guidelines being not set in stone, right? This needs to be updated and cognizant of culture, which isn't consistent all the time. And we also have to recognize that, when we're going into an environment where there has been a people who are native to that land and culture and community, we are visitors. And I think there's a whole aspect to that we sometimes, thinking of my younger self, there's a responsibility that comes with that. And it's not making the assumption that everything you do is positive and bettering the situation, the area that you come to. And, the narrative that you have of that space might be different than the true narrative. And it's our responsibility to seek to learn about that. With Haiti, a lot of people recognize Haiti as the poorest country of the Western Hemisphere. This is how it's often described. But another way you could describe it is that Haiti was the first Black republic. Haiti was the first country to abolish slavery. And they didn't just abolish slavery in their own country, but they did it for their neighboring countries as well. And if you look at the level of poverty and suffering that Haiti is currently experiencing, if you take the time to learn about their history, a lot of Haitians understand the current state of their affairs is the result of international intervention and other countries punishing them because they abolished slavery. And the French colonizers having them go into debt afterwards. And it's just such a different perspective once you learn that history compared to just reading in a text or a news article.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you start to learn that history? Did you know much about Haiti before going?
I knew nothing of the history before I went. Mm-hmm. And of course, I was well-intentioned. I wanted to help. And I think also to do with that, again, going into an environment like that, and a lot of times with international aid, you think about, okay, if we're talking about the locals or the people native to that area, there's talk about empowerment or participation, and it's really, in order to really be effective, it's about a lot more than that. I've described it before as like, it's not about yeah, it's not about just inviting them to participate. It's not about like offering them a seat at the table, because it's their table. Like, it's literally their table, and we're the guests. And so that's where it's your responsibility to learn from them and to seek guidance. And you know, if you're wanting to create positive change, what I think is positive change for this community might not be what they want. And also, I think it's important not to assume that, or put the onus on them to necessarily be sharing that with you. There's this, unfortunately, this power dynamic where if I'm coming in offering support, even if it's not necessarily the support that they need and want, in most cases they will accept it. And so you have to be really conscious about the way you're approaching your presence in this community and having a positive change. That's your responsibility. You know, it's not theirs to come and tell you. Maybe you will find people who do that, but it's really about us being cognizant that if our lives aren't the ones affected, we shouldn't always be the ones making the decisions. And if you're coming into a space where, again, there's already this existing culture and community and environment, you're the newcomer, and there's this whole wealth of information and history to learn about.
Awesome. That's the beautifully said, and the perfect segue to introduce Katie. Katie, could you tell us? Hi, I can't run away now. Tell us about your work and on the topic of sharing, right, and Dreaming Roots and how that came to be.
Well, there's definitely history to the Dreaming Roots, so I'll back up a little bit. So I am a member of Kluane First Nation, and so proud to be on this panel with all of you, and having you open the way you did just makes it even more powerful, because I'm the co-founder of Attica. So Attica means coming into the light in Southern Shoshone, and it's this incredible, it would have been our 12th year this year, but because of the pandemic, we celebrated our 10th year. And Kaylee's been with Yukon First Nation Culture and Tourism for 10 years as well, so I feel like we all have play a part in the work that we do. Our mandate at Yukon First Nation Culture and Tourism is really about uplifting our communities, our artists, our tourism operators here in the Yukon. As you guys know, it's very diverse here. We're not the voice, but we ensure that there's a voice at the table when it comes to those areas. So when I first started this work, it was actually back in Canada Winter Games. Was held here. I think it was 2007. And there was no, at that time, Aboriginal participation. And I said, you know, I was young, and I was like, why is that? Like, we should have a voice at this table, and we should have our art here, we should have our culture. And so I soon was able to get each community involved, and we had this incredible event, actually just where the Culture Center sits now, called Gathering of Northern Nations. And it was this incredible, cultural, rich gathering of each community coming with their gifts and their songs and their stories and their mukleks and their beading. And it was just, and I think even in the Yukon was like, wow, like, we have such a strong history and culture here. And I think from that, it just planted the seeds to so many other events, including, you know, the first ever arts cultural event here in the Yukon, which is kind of turned into Attica, and then of course our participation in the Olympics. So Vancouver was a huge milestone for the work that we do, and this sort of ties into the work with Dreaming Roots, but we were always sort of just creating these initiatives and projects, always for the opportunity to ensure that Indigenous artists had space, either here in the Yukon, nationally, internationally. And through this work, we
and through the Olympics, we're like, well, let's bring what kind of story do we want to tell to the world? And so we were able to bring 70 people from all the communities. We had performing artists, we had visual, we had elders. It was just so incredible to be a part of that. But we did a show called What the Land Remembers, and it was the first time where we brought storytellers, singers, like contemporary, traditional, drummers. What is that story? And so we created this 60-minute multidisciplinary showcase that was shown to the world at the Olympics. So forward, 10 years later, Charlene Alexander is co-founder with Yukon First Nation Culture and Tourism, and one day we're like, I feel like we need to do that again. Like, what? You're crazy. And I said, well, it was such a great opportunity for training and mentorship and connecting with emerging artists and performing artists, and through our elders, through our incredible cultural knowledge keepers that were able to support these artists. So through COVID, we were able to seek some incredible funding for this, because it was really this model of how do we blanket each artist? Like, what do you need? Do you need, like in terms of space and creating? And rather than saying this is what we need, it was like we just provided the tools for them to create their magic, to create their gifts. And there were so many times where we're like, we're gonna gather. Oh, there's restrictions. So we're like, only 10 people can come. Okay, well, how are we going to do that? We have 2 directors, and I also want to acknowledge, like, it wasn't just one person. We had such an incredible team. Diet, family show from Kluane, as well as Alejandro Monserrat were the main directors, and they worked with each artist individually. And yeah, it was really incredible to see the magic of just that one-on-one, to bringing artists together based on the stories that they were going to tell together, because it was really the story of past, present, and future of Yukon First Nations, and we had 3 storytellers that sort of wove all these incredible themes of resiliency and residential school, like all these things that we needed to tell the world, like this is who we are as Yukon First Nations. And 4 weeks before the show, because we premiered Streaming Roots at the Arctic Art Summit, as well as the 10th year anniversary for Attica. And it was just so, 4 weeks out, we're like, let's build the show. So we were able to do that. And that just shows that innovation and that resiliency, that anything's possible. We had 60 artists that took part in Dreaming Roots. I feel like there's another chapter to this. We want to tour it to every community, and hopefully we can tour it nationally and internationally. So it's just one of those things where it's like you just have to innovate and change things as you go to support the community and support artists through their development and their growth.
Can you tell us about opening night?
Oh,
June
yeah.
26th, paint the picture. What did it feel like? All that work going into it, like 10 years thinking about it, getting it through COVID, and then the curtains draw open. What did it feel like?
I would love, because of course Mary Jane was one of our key elders that supported each artist through this journey. I would love her perspective, because I think for me was, I'm just getting chills talking about it. I have a different perspective too, because we didn't have that space to create and to show who we are through our culture, through our language. And so seeing elders coming out of the show and crying and just being that, what just happened? It's like reclaiming, and then it's like planting the seeds for the next generation of what we do through arts.
Yeah, one thing in that was I spoke about that kwayajol, that welcome, that anticipation, because all the communities had someone in this folks.
I was wondering what you, I thought you were waving to me. Kwajal is that anticipation, and all of the communities around the Yukon had someone in a Dreaming Roots show. So that word of mouth is really a game changer here in this part of North America. From my younger brother, for him to come all the way in and put on his mooskin vests and take part and bring grandchildren to that show, that was, we went, George is going? And he went to the matinee, and he said that you guys don't miss, you make sure that you're there on time, because he said it's just really neat. Okay. Even being part of the scripting, taking part and hearing the rehearsals, but it's very different to sit back with family and to see all of this story being presented. And it was just, Katie said tears. It was, there were tears in there because what was being said and what was being presented was truth. And to see our truth being told on a stage like that was so, it still stays with me. The only thing is that how do you get the younger generation to bring that kind of thinking and way of doing to life on a daily basis when you compete against Marvel movies or Marvel? There's a big one that they told us that if you miss it, then you're missing out. I can't remember the name of it. Or Black Panther? Yeah. Anyways, the kids said that you have to go see this. And I went, well, when the Dreaming Roots come to our community, if I go to this, are you going to go to that? We don't need to bounce the things off and that off of our generations like that. What we need to be able to do in that is just have that space and have that opportunity so that that truth is what it is here on this land. You said that when you came that you had to practice. I could just see you standing in front of the mirror practicing.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. I wanted to get it right, but I didn't know. Yeah.
But that's great that you did that, because that is when we hear anybody speaking our language, we just like that. We're just like all ears. So you want to have that kind of sharing as well. You want to have that, and by having that kind of understanding that you're talking about, that you can do that. You can uplift and take the words and that from Jimmy Johnny and that uplifting each other, and the words from Lizzie Hall of having respect for everyone. Natsi Tra.
Well, that's beautifully said. And that actually brings me to my next question. Kaylee, bringing together 14 elders from nations and including also Taku River Tlingit, how do you curate a space where everyone can say their piece, say their word, feel heard, and also integrate each part into a cohesive guideline? Like, people have things to say. How do you make sense of that?
Yeah, well, in terms of creating the space, we were really lucky to work with Copper Joe Jack to help us guide that process. And Copper Joe had been developing a model called the Land and Peoples Reconciliation Model that really focused on bringing together ancestral knowledge and Western knowledge together, and he'd been using it in more of a land planning context, but we felt that it could be applied to this conversation as well. And so working with him was really important in helping to create that space and create that feeling of trust and safety, and making sure we gave a good amount of time to talk about the questions that were being asked. So I think that was part of it, like just, and having people in the room that had relationships and knew each other too, so there was a level of safety and comfort. Basically the process, like there was a What We Heard document that we took back to the same elders, because we wanted to make sure we hadn't misinterpreted, missed anything, and wanted their blessing to keep moving forward. So I think like that engagement process is really key to the work we do, is engaging and looking for encouragement and the blessings to keep going with the work. And I think another thing for me, like that I've kind of learned through the process, is that really the engagement piece never ends in some way. Like even as we start sharing these guidelines with a wider audience, like that's actually going to be part of the engagement as well, because then once they're out in the world, that's when you start to see reactions and hear from people more than, if you try to talk to everyone that you could possibly talk to before putting them out, like there's maybe there's a lost opportunity in that too. So
What was it like to be in that room for you personally? Were there changes in your own perspective from the things that you learned and heard?
It was an honor to be in that room with those elders, some who I knew and had some relationship with, like Gudia here, others who I had never met. And I mean, it's always an honor to sit in a room with elders, right, and get to hear those stories and that laughter and watch the interactions. So it was pretty special for me, and I think for Katie too, and for other people that were sitting in and listening. And I think, I always learn when I listen to elders, and I think one of the big things for me was like, we kind of went into this initiative thinking like, this is for visitors, which it is, but that it's for everybody, and these are teachings that everyone can benefit from learning or learning more about, and that was a bit of a shift for me in my perspective, I think.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And for Morgan, for you, I know you mentioned in the beginning that there were some hard lessons for you to learn. Which one was the hardest?
Oh. I think I think a really big lesson is, again, just this self-awareness of kind of keeping your own ego in check. And
how do you do that? How do you keep that ego in check? How do you know it's gone too big?
Yeah, I think it's not, it's just human, it's just human. And again, it might be the good intention of wanting to help. And I think that's sometimes an obstacle in doing better. Like you said, once we know better, we do better. But a lot of times people have a hard time accepting that maybe they've been doing something that was harmful, or that wasn't respectful, or that wasn't helpful when it wasn't intentional. It was this lack of awareness maybe. But a lot of people have a hard time accepting that, and that ends up being an obstacle to improving the way you interact with people and your environment. If you get defensive, or you don't want to accept that you could have been doing something better. And so I always try to say to people, you just need to see it as an opportunity to improve, as opposed to criticizing yourself or feeling, ashamed about it. It's an opportunity to learn, and I think it's also a continual process. Like, I definitely, I've been living in Haiti alongside Haitians for over a decade. I speak the local language. I still don't live experiences the same way Haitians who've grown up in Haiti do. I still don't understand the culture and country the way that they do, and I still don't know how to perfectly do exactly what we're talking about in terms of, making sure that I am learning from them all the time, and considering differing perspectives. I think it's just, we have to accept it's this continual growth that requires that self-awareness. And it's also doesn't mean that we don't have our place in that. It can actually be so powerful when we are learning and excited about a culture and a country and language. And I know a lot of Haitians love the way that I speak Creole really well, or like I have tattoos in Creole, and just like when they see you falling in love with their country and language and culture and validating that, it can be really powerful for them as well. So I think that there's a lot to be said for continually working on that, and just accepting that we're all human, and we all need to be learning from each other. And it's not that you're wrong or you don't know. It's just about being humble enough to continually seek to do better.
Well, it sounds like that shift in perspective of what needed to be done was the catalyst for the work internally, which then powered the work externally. And I have the numbers of your work. So the majority of children in orphanages, 80% have a living parent. You have reunited over 200 children with their families. I'm gonna cry in a second. Over 300 children have been supported to attend school through your work. And over 1,500 have received medical care in 2017 alone, because of the way that you changed your perspective and moved that forward.
And that's why, to me, residential schools, whenever I hear about it, is I see that from a whole other perspective as well. And there's so many parallels to what a lot of has happened here compared to the orphanage system in Haiti, where children are being separated from their families. A lot of times in Haiti, it's just the perception that they'll have access to maybe education or food more so in the orphanages, and sometimes that's most often not the case. And again, sometimes these are orphanages run by foreigners. These kids are being raised disconnected from their communities, and then at a certain point they're expected to reintegrate. But it's this whole different perspective, and it's so interesting for me because I spent some time living in an orphanage alongside a group of kids, and I saw groups of foreign aid organizations coming in thinking they were helping these kids, and I saw the reality that they were supporting the business that was exploiting the kids. And it just shows how much the perspective of those supporting the orphanage is different than the perspective of the kids living in the orphanage, which is different from the perspective of the parents giving up the kids to the orphanage, which is different than the orphanage owner. Like, all of these different perspectives. And that's where it becomes so, if you're wanting to help these kids, you can't be deciding what's best for them if you're not, experiencing what they are. And And then there was also this huge disconnect between like the Haitian child protection authorities, who were trying to combat this system of child abuse, and then the international aid, which had more resources and actually made the Haitian authorities less powerful, because now the orphanages were receiving more resources and funding than the government. And so sometimes there's this imbalance of resources and this misunderstanding or misperception that can be really damaging, and that's pretty scary. So a big part of what we do now is, of course, reconnecting those kids with their families, but also trying to change people's mentality, and it's a global issue. In Haiti, there are Haitians, amongst a lot of communities, they think that orphanages are better for kids because they're only thinking of the basic needs, not all of the emotional and developmental needs of the children. And then globally, again, a lot of people think that it's a positive thing to support orphanages. So there's, so much awareness raising that needs to happen. And yeah.
Beautifully said. The key words that I keep hearing over and over again are respect, commonality, worldview, and self, right? It's about checking into your ego and knowing what you can do, and also how you refrain from taking over. Morgan, a documentary film was made about the story and about the work that you're doing, but it was called Not About Me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell us more about the decision behind that title?
Yeah, so Kelly Milner, who's the filmmaker, which I'm sure a lot of you know Kelly, and it's interesting because a lot of people ask about the documentary, and it's not that I wanted to have a film made about, not about me, but there had been a lot of footage taken over the years by different videographers as I was establishing the organization, and Kelly ended up inheriting all of this footage. And when I met with her for the first time about, having her take on this project of developing a film, and I guess she always says, like, she was thinking that she's just going to do this profile on this Yukoner who went to Haiti, and I was like, I think it'll be great to have this film, but I just don't want it to be about me. Like, I don't want it to just be the story of what I did. That to me would be really limiting the message. Like, I want this to be a tool that will help raise awareness about these issues that I've dedicated my life to. And it was also really difficult for me to see the footage of my younger self because I've changed my perspective and grown so much. It was really hard to see that. I'm like, I'm not this person anymore. But that's what a lot of people can relate to, and it also, is uniquely, they can see my growth. So it was like, okay, use me like me and my story kind of as this relatable, interesting character to help get across these bigger messages. But what I really love, and I was pretty clear, and Kelly really took my input into account a lot, was like, I don't want to be the only voice. I don't want it just to be about me. And so she did do a really good job of getting other people's voices, and she's like, Morgan, like, you're not the hero of the story. Elixon is the hero of the story, and Elixon is a young man who was actually in the orphanage that I lived in 2011, and who is now a staff member of my organization, and so he has kind of the experience firsthand of being in an orphanage, and then also of working with children who come out of orphanages. And yeah, I'm just learning more and more ways of not just learning for myself, but how do I elevate other people's voices. I'm not always going to be the one to speak, and certain things where I might be invited to a media interview or something like that, I'll have a colleague or someone speak with me, or I was invited recently to speak as a witness before the House of Commons about the current crisis in Haiti. But again, it's like I don't want to just, yes, I've lived in Haiti during the crisis, but again, it's not about my privileged experience, it's about the situation in the country. And so I really tried to make an effort, even though I was the one speaking, to be getting the message of, you know, other people who are actually the Haitian people across. And yeah.
Thank you. We are almost out of time, but I have one question for each and every one of you. The work that we do, sometimes we're so stuck in the next step, the next thing, we just got to get it out, we just got to do it. And then once it's done, we start looking, okay, tracking the numbers, tell a story. Tracking the stories, which also tell a story, of course. But what about your personal vision for what could be from the programs each of you have been a part of? So tell us more about what your biggest hope is for the travel guides. I kept the big one for the last one.
I mean, I think for me, like, my biggest hope is that we get to a place where the Yukon First Nation story is not, it's the first thing people know about or think about. It's, you know, for so long it has been either not part of the narrative or an afterthought or a tag on, a tack on, and I think, yeah, that would be my biggest vision, that it's like the first thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason why people come here, not something that they take away.
Yeah.
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 I had the opportunity to attend at the University of Alberta and some of their recreation leisure studies programs. And in the 1990s, there was this thing called authenticity in cultural tourism. And there was a number of Aborigine, Maori, Native American, Native Alaskan, Native Hawaiian, First Nation Inuit and Métis and Michif people here in this country that were looking at how are they going to bring people in and have some kind of economy within their community. And then now all of this time has passed. The first thing that after about 10 years, many of these businesses said that, oh my gosh, we went too big. Now this impact within our community on the land areas it's just too much. So they put a stop. They said, the Zuni people said, no more on this ceremony time, no visitors in our community. The Pueblo people in New Mexico said that when we have our Easter dances, your cameras are here. And if we confiscate your camera, we keep your camera. No, if you come as a visitor, as a guest to this time of what is prayer time for us. So when you think of the storytelling in that, I remember when we were young, we didn't have electricity in our community. We didn't have running water. We had to go and haul wood all the time because we had to use old sweet saw. In the evening time, because we only had 8 transistor and 12 transistor radios, that's how I listened to Howie Meeker on Saturday night on hockey. we used to sit around and grandmas or grandpas would tell stories. And then you start telling a story, then they'd point to you, and look at. Everybody would just keep quiet until you start telling the story. Then after a while you forgot, and then they make you go back and let this one tell a story. Juk, you tell that part of the story, because you tell that part of the story the best. And then, go ahead. So that's how we learned how to tell a story, but to make that story all of our story, and to make sure that we told the story the right way. Because if we didn't, then they all laughed, and then it wasn't like a hard laugh. It was, oh, you did it again. Go ahead, learn it again. Okay, then after many years, you start to tell that story, and then when it's come to a certain part of the story, then they'll tell you, Juk, you tell that part of the story because you tell it best. So for around this kind of an area, it's really urban population. I did this whole big research project for this night, for this day. Population-wise, 2021, there's 43,000 people in the Yukon, 43,876. And 33,900 and something is here in Whitehorse. So when you look around in all of the other areas of the Yukon, what has happened when we talk about scale and impact is that the recreating, the visitation from people that get tired of being in the office and need to get out and do something tends to move outside of the Whitehorse area, and that becomes recreating areas for urban people in Whitehorse. And that is exactly what all of those other people from the land and their teachings and their learnings is that make sure what you wish for and what you work for is for the good. And in some cases, they've built beautiful cultural centers with nobody, the follow-up in the community of nobody being able to provide that kind of information in the cultural center that they had envisioned of beaters, of high tenors, of what they wanted inside of that space. So it's great to have space, but if you don't make it a home, then it's just space. To be able to think and take those visitors when they come here to this land and to these waters, that they are coming to your home. And when they come to your home, how do they behave? Do they just barge in the door, kick off their shoes and do whatever they want, and then leave? Right now in Qatar, where they're having the World Cup for soccer, surprise, you're in Qatar and there is no beer for sale at the stadium. That is a big, like, oh, okay. But that is, people are respecting that, or else they go to jail. But here in this kind of a nation, when people come to your home. They're respectful, and because they're taught that. And that's what hopefully the guidelines that are laid out for visitors will do, is they will allow that visitors the space to understand and be respectful as they come to visit and spend time and share space. So.
Thank you. I hope that vision is what's produced by the work you're doing. It's really what I hope. Thank you. Kaylee, for you, do you have a personal hope for? You said yours. Oh, geez.
My hope, well, I'm echoing everything that has been said. I think we all have good intentions in the work that we do, and you know, it's, for me, it's a calling. So it's like it's like a responsibility to uphold our communities, our culture, our language. So my hope is, I want my daughter to learn the language. I want her to be in a community with elders. I want her to learn how to sing her songs and just be around our community. And I think, going back to what Gadia was saying, is like that space needs to be created for that work to happen for the next generation. So Together Today for Children Tomorrow applies for everything in the work that we do, because we ensure that we're always thinking about the next generation and what we need to do now for the next 10 years. So yeah, really honored to sit on this panel and to share our stories today. So show me that.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure too, like the work that you do, we won't see the full effect of it until 10 years from now again, right? When your daughter, little girl, is looking up and saying, that's what I want to do, right? And then we see them take up those classes, learn the language, and continue that on.
Well, I mean, I think about 10 years ago, we all learned our language through going to school, but it was just never enough. And now we're seeing language revitalization happening in a very strong way in all our communities, and we have young speakers, and we still have elders who are able to share their knowledge. So there's hope. Like, there's hope in the wellness and creating these types of initiatives. And the elders are so caring and loving, and they want to share their knowledge with us so that we can carry and share that knowledge, not just to Indigenous First Nation communities and families, but for all of you. So
thank you for sharing. Morgan, for you, your hope.
Mine's a little different context, but I think, personally, and for the work that Little Footprints is doing, we really want to see this shift where, children aren't being sent away from their families anymore. But on a more personal level, I really value within the organization, like, having a bottom-up approach. And I just constantly want to work more consciously towards, in every way possible, like making sure it's not me imposing on the people that we're supporting or on our team as well. Again, this is something that I've become so much more aware of, but yeah, making sure that both our board and myself are not the ones imposing the way that we work and our interventions, just fostering really a bottom-up approach. And I think for Haiti in general as well, Haiti, there was this big push for tourism in Haiti several years ago. It's been a little difficult the last couple of years with increased insecurity, but Haiti is a country that is so beautiful, like such a wealth of natural resources and beauty and culture, like amazing. And I just hope that one day that is what it's recognized for, not its poverty. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today on your perspectives, and I hope that the perspective in the room has changed too on these topics of people, place, and transformation. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Now, we do have lots of goodies. We did go a bit into the networking time, but if you had any questions for the panelists, feel free to ask them while we eat the rest of the food there and grab some drinks. Thank you.
Thank you.